Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Patio Pondering. Today I have with us Amanda Minton, who currently is a swine breeding specialist, expert, guru at AcuFast Genetics. She and I share quite a few things. Number one, we're both part of the swine industry. Number two, we both have degrees from Purdue University. Number three, we both live in Indiana. And number four, we both had the joy of working with Dr. Alan Schinckel.
That is right.
Yes. So we'll try and limit the Alan stories so we can concentrate on Amanda and not our newly retired friend from West Lafayette.
Newly retired. Yep.
So Amanda, we're of the same generation. We both work in the swine industry. We both grew up in Indiana.
We did.
We both came back to Indiana or stayed in Indiana. Can you kind of give us an idea of your progression from a child in Logansport, Indiana to where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. So so in terms of my upbringing, grew up in north central Indiana by way of Iowa. I like to say I was born in Iowa. My parents grew up on farms in southeast Iowa, diversified livestock and grain farms. And so we moved to Indiana when I was 10. So Iowa is still very much part of my home as well as Indiana. So we moved when I was 10 and to around Logansport, so Cass County, Indiana. And my parents made that decision and they thought that was the best for their family. But I think it took them a lot of courage to make that decision when everybody else was still in southeast Iowa. But so we raised sheep growing up. No, not really any pig experience from my standpoint, but mostly sheep in those first formative years.
That is neat. And I didn't realize the Iowa connection. So my oldest children were born in Des Moines, and we moved to Iowa when they were 6 and 9. So similar path to you. That's interesting.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah. So, I think that move to Indiana. So my dad was in Purdue Extension for many years in Cass County, and then ended up working at the university at ASREC at Purdue. But, I think that move for myself and my siblings somewhat helped give us wings, because we've never felt that we needed to stay around Logansport, and we've all kind of done our own thing and gone different places. So I appreciated the fact that my parents did that. Now looking back, at the time it wasn't easy, but looking back, it was for the best.
Like, what are you doing? I'm leaving all my friends.
Yeah.
Iowa's such a great place to live, Mom and Dad. Come on.
My grandparents, right? Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So
how did you make the jump from sheep to swine when you were at undergrad or grad school?
Yeah. So, I didn't really know, I guess, that I wanted to work with pigs until I started working with pigs. So growing up with sheep, I was in 4-H, I was in FFA, showed sheep. I did show a few pigs, but never had any commercial experience with pigs. But, through, I think, my 4-H and FFA experiences, just learned to be open to new things. So in 4-H, I participated in 4-H Roundup. And that's where, as a 4-H'er, you got to go to Purdue. This is for like 7th, 8th, 9th graders. You get to go to Purdue, spend a couple nights, live in the residence hall, eat the food, take some different hands-on learning classes. And so after that experience, I said, I want to go to Purdue. It didn't seem so big to me anymore. It was a fantastic experience, made a lot of friends, connections with the professors. It just felt like the right fit. I didn't even look anywhere else. That's where I wanted to go. So, that certainly shaped my path going forward. I also participated in one of the 4-H events where we went to Washington, D.C. for some kind of leadership event through 4-H. And, it's such a small world that you meet people then that you end up going to Purdue with, and that you work with in the industry. And so that was pretty impactful on, just leading me to Purdue. So initially I wanted to be a veterinarian, right? Like a lot of animal science, pre-vet people going in. I worked for Dr. Chris Sayota at the Cass County Animal Hospital for 2 years in high school. And, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought, what he did was interesting, and he spent a lot of time with me those couple years. So I thought, well, maybe I'll do pre-vet, but I don't really know what I want to do. So I started as pre-vet, but then as I got into more of my animal science classes, decided that probably wasn't the way that I wanted to go.
So you started pre-vet. Was that because that was what you thought a person that wanted to be in livestock wanted to do?
Yes, for the most part. And I didn't understand the breadth and depth of the opportunities there were, in the animal science industry. And I think that's true of a lot of students these days also. I do a lot of recruiting for our internship program and for some of our open positions. And so one of my passions is to work with young people and try to mentor them, and not to dissuade them from any certain path, but just to kind of open their eyes and say, okay, that if you really are passionate about this, this is a path that you can take. And so that's one of the things that I like just to give back, right, to students and to help them kind of figure that out the way that I did.
Well, it seems in agriculture we have an issue that the overall arching opinion is old MacDonald is in his overalls with a pitchfork, and he goes out and collects eggs and pets the pigs and hitches his horses up or drives around in his tractor and makes eggs and milk for us.
Mm-hmm.
But if you dive past that, we also have the problem in animal science where we don't understand that you have to have a nutritionist, you have to have a reproductive specialist, you have to have somebody that's involved in animal welfare. It's not just the veterinarian. And that puts a lot of pressure on the veterinary school. And it also puts a lot of pressure on, in our case, the animal science department at Purdue, that you have all these people that don't understand that there's so much more to livestock than being a veterinarian. And your mentorship exposes you to those people that have a moment, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I have to give a lot of credit to Barry Delks, who recently retired also. But for the people that don't know him, so Barry was in charge of career services, specifically in animal sciences at Purdue for a long time. And he was very good and had a very profound effect, I think, on a lot of animal science students. So just providing them with information on other career avenues and encouraging them to try different things. And I really leaned on Barry during my time in Purdue, and even afterwards, after I graduated and was trying to make some decisions. He was always there for students, and now as an employer, he's been good to work with too. But he really, there were some summers that I did a couple internships, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And he said, hey, why don't you try this internship with the Animal Ag Alliance? It's out in Washington, D.C. Again, I've been to D.C. through my 4-H trip. And I said, hey, I think I can do this. I'm going to go live on Georgetown's campus for the summer. Just get a very different perspective than what I've had growing up, learning about just, I guess, animal rights groups and how we kind of counter their message as an industry. And so his kind of prodding a little bit to try things really opened up my eyes to different opportunities.
Well, it just hit me as you're talking about Dr. Delks and your experience at Purdue that I think you and I had two different experiences at Purdue, because when I was at Purdue from 89 to 93, it was a traditional animal science department, 250 students concentrating on livestock. And pre-vets were elsewhere in the School of Ag. They were just a degree and weren't involved except for those few that understood that, hey, I got to get some of these experiences. And one of those experiences, we were taking a breeding class, and this young lady, that's a veterinarian now, very smart, from Massachusetts or Connecticut, didn't know that you spelled U-E-W-E. And she was doing something, and she goes, and what's this iwi? And the rest of us are going, iwi? What the heck's an iwi? So anyway, that was my experience. So your experience with a broader student population, and my son just graduated from Purdue 2 years ago in animal science with 900 students, and he was in Creighton. I can't relate because it was a small, intimate group when I was there. Did that experience of coming from a farm where you didn't know really what you wanted to do with a little bit of 4-H exposure and then being thrown into a large animal science department, is that helping you as you mentor and as you work with interns at AcuFast?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think that, just helping understand where different students are coming from. And, one of the things that I try to do when I go to these career fairs and talk to students is a lot of times, your default is to look for somebody that has already done a pig production internship or has some of that experience, because you automatically think, oh, they'll fit great. That's not always the case. And sometimes you got to take a chance on students that don't have the pig experience or maybe don't have as much livestock experience, as long as they have some of those character traits, that you're looking for. And so it's helped me to be a little bit, I guess, broader and open in the students that I talk to, because I know that when I was in their seat, I didn't have the pig experience, but now I'm working with pigs. So just taking those things into consideration.
I think that we go back to where we talked about that impression of what people think about ag. We in ag put our own barriers up also. And those barriers make us want to look for the unicorn now. I mean, I think back to 40 years ago when I was thinking about going to Purdue, everybody was in my shoes, had some livestock. They grew on the farm. They wanted to be in pigs, and they knew the nuances of being in the farrowing house, pulling lambs, because that's what we live. Yeah. And if we if we put up that barrier, hey, we're looking for Jim Smith and Amanda Minton from 30 years ago, they're not out there because there's not very many of us anymore. And and a lot of those kids that have those experiences in 2025 that we did, they're saying, screw it, I'm going to become an engineer. I want to go be a nurse. I want to be a teacher.
Yes.
So you have to be, you have to look for, like you said, look for those obscure traits that everybody's looking for. And it happens to be somebody that wants to work with livestock. So how do you overcome, how do you look for that person, and how do you search through their skills to find somebody that you think will be a good livestock person, or as we used to call it, animal husband?
Yeah.
When you don't have that, hey, I've already worked with the pigs.
Yeah, that's a good question. I try to look at what previous experiences they've had, but also, have they in our interviewing process, we try to be pretty specific in the type of interview questions that we use, and try to understand how they've demonstrated a hard work ethic, how they've persevered, how they communicate with people. And so really just looking for those, I guess, character traits, right? Rather than more the soft skills, I guess, rather than some of your other hard skills. But just have they demonstrated those types of things, whether it's through studying for class or other jobs or other experiences that they've had, and how will that relate to what we're going to ask them to do? Because and clearly laying out the expectations too. I mean, we've ran into instances where, there's some things that we assume that they should know, but like you're going to need your own vehicle to drive to your internship, or you're going to need some of these things, but being very specific on laying out the expectations so that there's no miscommunication.
Oh, see, I never would have thought about that.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay.
Until now.
Till 2025. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and I think back to the times that I've been involved in interviewing salespeople over my career. And invariably somebody in management will say, well, they've never sold feed. And it's usually somebody that's 22, 23, 24, first or second job straight out of school. And this has taken me a while to come around to, but I'll say, hey, I don't care. The good thing is he doesn't know how to sell feed badly.
Right.
And in your case, it does. I can think about you from a breeding standpoint. They don't have any bad habits. They don't. So you can say, hey, here's how I want you to breed these pigs. And they're well, I learned this at so-and-so, and here's how we did it at home. So from that standpoint, not having that unicorn like you and me is a blessing because you don't have to retrain them.
It is. If they're hungry to learn, if they just want to be immersed and want to learn, I mean, that goes a long way.
Your experience of moving from Iowa to Indiana and being exposed to pigs as a college student and being more comfortable with sheep, how does that help you as you're training people as you're in your role as being an expert on breeding pigs?
Yeah, I think it's all about being able to relate to people, right? And to be able to communicate on that level. And so that's probably part of my favorite part of just my job and just in this industry is that you get to meet so many different people that have so many different stories about where they came from and just building that personal relationship. I think once you set that groundwork and you can communicate the right way and know your audience, then you're able to make progress. Then you're able to set goals and say, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is why. But having that relationship piece is key, and being able to connect is really key.
How much did your exposure in 4-H to communication set the foundation for you to be able to do that in your job?
I think it certainly influenced it. I was an FFA and was pushed to be in leadership positions, and through I did livestock judging as a high schooler. I didn't pursue that in college, but just creating that confidence to speak really, really helped in your communication with everyone else, right? So I do think that that's a skill set that I learned through 4-H and FFA that helps me in my job every day.
I believe that you're working with a more diverse background experience than I ever would have.
Okay.
I mean, from your standpoint, when I got out of college, it was just a whole bunch of us looked like me. Not everybody was as beautiful as me, but
Right.
But you're dealing with anybody from first generation came from Guatemala to somebody that grew up in downtown Indianapolis.
Yep.
You've got different skin colors. You've got different English as a first language, I'm sure.
Yep.
So you're being able to communicate in your shoes is a couple steps beyond just the simple of tell them what you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again what you told them. I mean, you've got so many more nuances.
It's a lot of different layers, right? Yep. That's for sure. And when it comes to languages, I mean, certainly that English as a second language can be a barrier. I know a little bit of Spanish to be dangerous, but then I have to rely on other resources, right? So I have to rely on those that speak it a lot better than I do. But I still, even with that, I think you can still make a connection with somebody, even if you don't fluently speak their language.
Well, and I've discovered over the years in the travels I've done, if you try and communicate with them on their level, it seems like it's much more appreciated than if you walk in and just say, I'm going to talk to you in English and someone's going to translate and just deal with it. It's your problem. I gave a presentation in Hanoi many years ago, and I opened it up speaking a little bit of Vietnamese. I've forgotten what I said. Maybe I counted to 3 and said something, but you could see that the audience was like, oh, okay, this isn't going to be as bad. The rest of the presentation might have sucked, but at least I broke the ice. So I could see that you're doing the same thing as you're trying to work with people.
Right.
And I'm sure that your varied background and not knowing that you wanted to work with pigs helped you, because that helps you understand that other people were in your shoes that, hey, I know nothing about pigs. Teach me.
Yep.
So you can start at 0, where a lot of us would start at the second or third floor and say, well, you already know this. And your experience that you're seeing laying out the groundwork, like, oh, you do have to have a car.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Has to help you.
Yeah. And I think some of that too, with just, the first job I had with pigs, I think there were some assumptions made that I should know more than what I did, just because I was in animal science. And so that took more, I want to say that was hard for me to step up and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't know all this. Like you're making some assumptions here, but you're going to have to teach me. Like, I don't know that in farrowing that I needed to clean these feeders out. Like, you're going to have to teach me that because I don't know. And so you have a good appreciation for good teachers and those that need some work. So just trying to encourage that, within the group of people that I work with, and when you're training new people, and just don't make any assumptions, but really try to teach them as much as they're willing to learn.
Well, and I ran into that in the past role that I had, where it was said on more than one occasion, well, they came from Iowa State, they should know that. And
yeah,
no, they don't. No. In our case, they might have taken 245 pet a cow, but
right.
we can't make these assumptions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure that in your role as writing SOPs on breeding, it helps you to go, okay, they don't know this, so we're going to make it as rudimentary as possible. Is that helpful? Your experience of, oh God, I didn't know how to clean out the feeder, help you today as you help those people?
Exactly. It's, you got to get as many details as you can, right, without it being overwhelming, but making sure that we're not skipping on any of the details, whether it's cleaning out feeders or whether it's collecting boars or whatever it is, or moving boars. I mean, you got to start at that base level, but also include the why behind it. Why are we moving boars with sort boards, or why do we require you to do this? And then, moving on to that kind of next step of the conversation, the next phase of the conversation.
What are you seeing with people that shake out? The people that you hire to be in a breeding barn, how many have the skills to actually have the patience, the knowledge, or the acceptance of the training to become good in the breeding barn?
Yeah, I mean, that varies. Some of it has to do with just their openness to learn, right? I mean, if they're coming in and they're not willing to do a certain thing, or they're not willing to try to do something, even if they don't know how or don't want to, they're probably not going to be there very long. But, we've got a lot of good people that have come in without any pig experience that they're just hungry to learn, and they want to be there. They like pigs for some reason, or think they like pigs, and want to work with their hands, want to work with the animals. And just as long as they're willing to learn and they have a manager that's willing to teach them, then they stick around.
Well, once you get past the understanding that the pig smell won't leave you, and you will take multiple showers a day, you get down to the basics. I mean, if you're trainable, if you're willing to learn, if you follow instructions, those are basics for any employee.
Yeah, no matter what you're doing. Yeah.
And then the pigs just kind of come along.
Yep. I think it is important to celebrate the wins too. Like, sometimes we forget that, right? Like, we get somebody in, we get them trained, we get them going. It's just kind of day to day, we're doing our thing. And if we don't celebrate the wins, and we don't say, hey, you affirming what they're doing and just really taking that time, then they may not stay either, right? So
how do you celebrate those wins outside of quarterly production matrices or awards?
Yeah. So from my perspective, like, if I get feedback, for example, from a sow farm that say we're doing 90% farrowing rate, we have 16 total born, like, things are doing great, then I try to go back to that boar stud in particular and say, hey, this farm's doing a great job. You are part of that success. You don't often hear that, but you are part of that success, just so that they feel appreciated, right? The boar studs in particular, usually you don't hear anything unless something's going bad, right? So, like, that's, trying to really take the time to on those one-off moments when I hear something good, to make sure that it gets back to the people that are responsible for it.
It's cliche, but it takes a team to do what we do. And sometimes we forget that the team is also made up of the AA team in Fort Wayne that feeds people. In your case, it's the boar stud. And from a nutritionist side, I always talk about the sow being the factory and the farrowing room being the most important place in the system, because if you don't have the pigs, Everything else
Hmm.
doesn't matter. You're able to take that the next step behind
Yep.
that, where if you don't have the male side, doesn't matter
Yep.
what we do in a farrowing house. So that is
Yeah.
neat that you
If the
can go
semen
back and
quality is
help.
not good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I have set as a goal for this podcast is to find the obscure in a person's upbringing or their job or what they do. And there's a lot of things in agriculture that are obscure.
Okay.
And I think that what you're an expert in is really obscure.
Yeah.
Now, there's not many of us in the world that know that the end of a boar's penis is a corkscrew. And when you bring
Yep.
that up in casual conversation over a beer or a bourbon, people look at you like, how in the hell do you know that?
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes. There are not a lot of us. Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
What was it that made the light go on like, hey, this reproduction of pigs is pretty cool? And I want to go
Yeah.
down this really obscure path
Uh-huh.
in production.
Yep. So, I've always been interested in reproduction, and I missed the boat taking Wayne Singleton's class in Purdue. He
Mm,
retired before I was able to take that. I was really bummed about that. I keep in contact with Wayne now for
yeah.
other things, but so I didn't get to take his class. But then, I went and worked in the industry for a couple years as a management trainee. It's where I got my experience in sow farms,
Mm,
a little bit of boar stud, did some breeding projects. And at that point in time said, hey, I'm going to go back to grad school. Like when I graduated as an undergrad, I had some professors at Purdue say, hey, maybe you should think about grad school. At the time, my perception of research, I wasn't real keen on it. I didn't really
mm-hmm.
understand it. I don't think as much as what I do now, obviously. But so after I did that for a couple of years in the industry, I decided to go back to school. And because repro was an interest of mine, I said, I'm going to do that. And at that point in time, I didn't know where exactly I wanted to go. So I called a couple of professors from Purdue that I had before,
Mm,
and everybody said, hey, you need to at least look at Missouri. Like that is the place
yeah.
to go for repro. And so I did, and I interviewed with Tim Safransky and Matt Lucy, and I worked with them on a master's. And at that point in time, I was focused on the female side and heat stress. That's what my research was, and heat stress and parity one females. And so after that, I took a job for another genetics company in technical services. And, as the only repro specialized person. And at the time, they said, you know what? We really need somebody to go to boar studs. And you have a background in repro. So have at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how that started. There was a need, and as I got into the boar stud side of things, I really started to enjoy it. And it's definitely a very small community of people, both repro and boar studs. But there's like a handful of people, that really work with boar studs in the US. And the more that I got into the boar stud side of things, the more I enjoyed understanding boar stud operations, understanding the financial components of operating a boar stud. And then just from a repro standpoint, when we talk about boar research, there's not a lot of research
Mm-hmm.
dedicated to boar studs, whether it's nutrition, anything, right? So
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to do some boar research and try to expand on that knowledge base for the company I was working for, plus the industry. And so yeah, I get a lot of questions, from my kids, like, what do you even do? Like, what is this? And I'm very transparent with them and explaining. And my kids are ages 5 to 12. I have 5 kids. And so I'm very particular about using the right names for body parts and
No way.
explaining reproduction.
You should be
And
protecting those children from such nasty things as the real names.
yes, so they find it interesting too. My 12-year-old is very much like, oh, that is so gross.
Oh
Like,
my
why
God,
would you even
Mom.
do that? Right.
You touched a boy
So,
pig?
right. Exactly. Exactly. But I think there's a lot of fulfillment in that because, there aren't a lot of people that do it, and it's a small community, and being able to work with boar studs and that community is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I think I can name three of you. One lives in South Dakota, one lives in Minnesota, and one lives in Bedford, Indiana.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
There's the three.
Yep.
If I had questions on boars, I would go to those three.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
So let's take a real quick step back for my
Yeah.
non-commercial pig audience.
Mm-hmm.
95% of the pigs born in the United States, so that's 95% of the 120 million pigs that we market a year, are born from AI, and in this case, artificial insemination, not artificial intelligence.
Yep.
And in the pig industry, we have these satellite boar studs that genetic company and breeding companies and sow systems have spotted throughout the United States that are housed with different genetics of boars. And a sow unit will place an order for these boars. Hey, I've got 35 sows that are going to be in heat in the next 5 days. I need 70 doses of semen. The boar stud then goes out, collects that semen, extends that semen so that they have a certain amount of sperm inside that sample, and then distributes this for the UPS or runners or whatever. And the genetic progress on a farm is made from the sow selection on the farm, but by the boar selection that the boar studs have. And that puts a lot of pressure on these boar studs, because if something happens to that boar stud and those 80, 100, 150 boars don't produce semen, get sick, whatever, that affects massive amounts of sows.
Summer heat. Yes.
Oh, gee, summer heat, out of feed events, the water went out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Generator didn't turn on and they froze, got cold.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cold stress, heat stress, all those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So the pig industry is in a really cool position where we can make some massive genetic changes. I mean, if you wanted to change boars, you want to go from a boar that was bred for feed efficiency and like, hey, I want to breed to a red boar that's got some meat quality, you could do it today.
Right. Yep.
Like, okay, we know from week 35 on, all these pigs are going to be sired by a red boar. Think back to when I was a kid, or even 20 years ago, like, okay, you'd have to go, okay, what boar am I going to go buy? And I'm going to put him through quarantine. And then what if he doesn't shoot live rounds? It's changed so much. And that puts so much pressure on it. And that's the what is so unnerving from my standpoint as a nutritionist, on when people call about boar studs, I don't know shit.
Yeah.
Let's feed it like
that's a problem, right? I mean,
yes, it is. And if somebody calls me and says, hey, let's make some boar feed, it's going to be a sow developer feed. Yeah. I'm going to put some extra vitamins in it. If it calls for 2 pounds of a sow breeder pick, I'll put in 4 pounds. I might throw in some carnitine, might throw in some chromium. But then I'm like, there you go. Make sure they don't get fat.
Yeah. There's a big gap there, right? And I understand why, because I mean, I worked for a production company that focused a lot on research. And, of course, most of the nutrition research was on the wean to finish side, or the sow side. That's where the dollars went. But, and I understand that completely. But at the same time, you got a population of animals that we likely can make some improvements on how we're feeding them to make better quality semen and higher doses of semen that we haven't spent the resources on.
But when you look at it, the funnel of funds, grow finish is easy. That's where you eat most of our feed. Nursery's cool. We can make really cool things. Sows. Oh, why are we going to do a lot of research on sows when we don't feed a lot of sows? Because, and then boars. Nobody thinks. Yeah. So that's why it's cool that I know 3 of you I can go to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's a challenge. And feeding young boars, these boar studs, if you've got like more nucleus level populations, I mean, our annual placement rates are 125%, right? So, I mean, we're pushing a lot of boars into the studs, young boars that we're expecting to get high quality semen out of. So, I mean, that's at one extreme, right? Our more commercial studs, we would encourage a 75 to 80% replacement rate, just to make sure we're getting that genetic improvement, but not push them so hard that, we give them a little bit more time instead than what we would at nucleus level.
And think about the pressure that puts on that boar stud.
It is a lot of pressure on the stud, on the production team. There's a lot that goes with it.
And that's why I like what you talked about, sharing the successes and sending that information upstream, because they always get your delivery was late, you didn't extend right, you didn't have the temperature right, you forgot to do this. I got a dirty sample, there was blood in it. Why didn't you put the ropes out at the right time? they
Yep,
get inundated with negative so
they do.
much.
Yeah. And so that's why sometimes you have to buffer that, right? Like, in a former role, I was a production manager for multiple boar studs. And so, not every piece of feedback gets back to the boar stud. There's a buffer there, right? So that, yes, there's things that happen at the stud, there's things that can go wrong. And we have to take ownership in the times that it does go wrong and it is our fault. And we have to hold ourselves accountable. But on the other end of it, if we're constantly bombarded with questioning and it's your fault and those types of things, and that wears on a person, right? So there's kind of a buffering zone in there.
As you were growing up on the farm and you made the move to Indiana and you were working with sheep and your parents, was there anything, whether it's 4-H or FFA or your parents, that helped you have the mentality or the personality that, hey, I've got to be able to share the successes and buffer the bad stuff so that we're not inundating them with negativity and boosting people?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up, like, we raised sheep primarily to show, right? So we're in the show industry. And I think, whether you're showing livestock or you've got other projects that you're working on or different experiences or whether it's even sports, right? But, my parents were really good about, if things didn't go the way that you wanted them to, then, that's a growth opportunity, right? And you're going to fail at some things. On the other hand, affirming when things went right and just trying to be a very positive voice in our heads. Growing up, we were never yelled at for anything. I know there's lots of different parenting styles, and we're not going to go down that road. But growing up, whether it was when we were working with livestock, everybody was calm. There's a lot of positive reinforcements. Not that you weren't held accountable if things didn't happen the way that they were supposed to. You certainly did, but in a way that was loving and a way that you could hear it and not automatically be defensive and not be able to listen to what was being said.
So you didn't earn the shirt. I gained my language from working cattle.
No.
Yeah, I have to admit that my kids have been yelled at once or twice. It's
no judgment. Yeah.
But, I think part of that segued a little bit. It comes with growth, and my wife and I were just talking about this before. My oldest daughter's 25. She lives in Nebraska, and she has a completely different experience than my 15-year-old that's upstairs. Because it really sucks, but she was the guinea pig.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah, sorry, Shelby, we screwed up on a lot of things with you, and it makes your brother's life a lot easier. But I think that also applies to your role as you're helping people in these breeding systems, as you're helping your customers deal with their boar studs and your own boar studs. I mean, that experience has to help you as you've grown into being a manager and being able to give feedback.
I think so. And I think, it's real easy to be critical. And so I try to take a step back and, sometimes when you go to a farm or boar stud, there are a million things that you want to convey, that you want to help them with. But also understanding that long list of things probably isn't going to be helpful overall. So what are the top 3 priorities of things that we want to work on now? And then the next time, what are the next things? So once we've affirmed and said, okay, we got these things right, good job. How else can we move the needle? So just trying to approach it from that lens instead of coming in and saying, these are all the things that we need to change. Yeah. And, people being overwhelmed with that.
It's real easy. And I think about some of the walkthroughs I've done over the years, and you walk into a barn that's a freaking disaster. And you're like, you fill up a whole page like this and this and this and this. And then you get back to the office and you go, okay, mentally you think, okay, what is the most important thing? Let's go back to the most important thing. And if we get that one right, we can work on the next one. And it sounds like that's what you do. I mean, start with the feed and the water, and let's work down from there.
Yeah, for sure. Try to forge that relationship and then say, these are the first priorities, and build on that relationship, and then build on the success and the next steps you got to take.
So as you work with boar studs, and you've worked with them your entire career, Do you see a
Mhm.
difference in genders? Who works well in a boar stud? I know there's an assumption on the south side.
There's not really. I mean, whether it's the lab or the stud itself. I mean, there's certainly from my perspective, it comes down to the individual people and their strengths, right? If you are a detailed, meticulous person, you probably need to be in the lab. Um, and that doesn't really matter what gender
Mm.
from that perspective. Because I've seen both, right? In the barn, I'd say it's heavier on the male side than the female side. But there are certainly women that just prefer to get in there with the boars and don't want to mess with the lab and would just rather work with the boars themselves and collect. There's, probably a mix, right, in both sides of it.
As we've talked before, that we get away from farm kids just because there's not enough
Mm-hmm.
farm kids. You get to see a person for who they really are and not what their upbringing was or their previous experience. So you can place the right person in the right place.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a whole bunch of us in the sheep industry.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny, isn't it? Yeah,
there's a
there's a lot
yeah.
of us.
And I think
Yeah.
back to me, my wife said, we are not having pigs. She's a horse girl and pigs stink. Like, yeah, well, fine. And they tear
Uh-huh.
shit up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yep.
so that's why we're into sheep. I think we had our last lamb 2 days ago. And I think
Uh-huh.
about my
Yep.
major professor, Jim Nelson, with Power Cat Club lambs. You got Asmus and Shelton. You got you, Stacy Crowder up at Indianapolis. I mean, there's a bunch of
Uh-huh.
us that are in the pig industry that
Yep.
we don't have pig manure at home.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It is funny.
That's neat. One of your colleagues from your previous days that works with a big unit over in Ohio. They always set up in the one corner of the Indiana State Fair. It goes, hey, how's the pig business going?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. As you have interacted with students and you work with your internship program, what would be your suggestion to a 17, 18-year-old, 21-year-old that is a clean slate? They're in the animal
Mm-hmm.
science department somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
What would be one or two or three things that you would suggest to them as they prepare to leave the nest of the university system?
Yeah. One of the things that I've, talked to other college students about is sometimes you just got to try something. And if you find out you don't like it, that's okay. If you find out that it's not for you, there might be parts of it that you enjoy, um, but that's okay. And whether that's an internship or whether that's your first job, even if it's not what you think is your dream job or what you
Mm-hmm.
think is the best fit, sometimes you just got to try something and then you figure out whether or not that is where you want to be. For example, I didn't want to know that I wanted to work with pigs. I go work for a pig company, and now how many years later, I'm still working with pigs. And so that's kind of I guess, the first piece of advice that I typically tell students is just give it a shot. You got nothing to lose. Give it a shot and see if you like it. And if you don't, then you can always change course.
I think that's a big one. As I've experienced, the university system is just another step. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a perfection.
Yep.
You leave high school, you don't know crap.
Yeah.
You
Right.
leave college,
We don't know that, but we don't.
that's right. You still don't know crap. You a little bit more, but you still don't know anything.
Right.
And it appears to me as I'm over 50, so I'm that hey boomer, close to it, that
Mm-hmm.
the attitude has changed from, okay, you graduated, you get married, take your job, and you go on, here's your career,
Mm-hmm.
to, hey, we get some mulligans. Oh,
Yeah.
so it didn't work out going and taking that job at that huge system. Now go sell meat for Tyson or something. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the attitude has changed to where your
It
first or
has.
second job are no longer failures. They're just experiences.
And I think, though, the other thing that I feel like this college generation and probably high school too is just they're afraid to fail. Like
Mm,
they expect like there's I guess just a lot of pressure that they put on
yeah.
themselves or other people. I don't know that they need to be perfect. They need to succeed. And exceed extraordinarily well in everything that they do. But it's okay to fail. You should fail, and you should learn from those things and get back up and move forward. But I think that they miss that message somewhere along the line.
Do you think your growing up years, and I hate there's not your formative years on the farm, it sounds like a documentary where you see at BBC later. Amanda Minton's formative years on the farm.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the dirty secrets from the farm on Cass County.
Yeah.
But as you talked about your FFA and your 4-H experience and raising sheep, you failed.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you failed, because I know we fail here. Whether it's you didn't go out and check lambs and you had a dead lamb, and whether you thought you had a good lamb that was going to win and it got a red ribbon. Yep. Do you think those broad experiences that you had on the farm of successes muted with a lot more failures set you up to be in a position where you can help people understand that, hey, it's all not blue ribbons?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. I think so. And I mean, I think that's the whole point of like 4-H, right? Is learning by doing and growing. And whether it was with the sheep, or whether it was bombing a livestock judging contest, or just like not doing what you wanted to do, like, I certainly think that helps shape your mindset and helps you develop grit. And, you don't need any talent to have grit. It's all about passion and perseverance and keeping on going. So I certainly think that those are character traits that helped form me at that moment in my life, at those points in my life.
Well, my mom used to say, as I was trudging through my PhD program, which really wasn't that much of a trudge, but she said it's just stick-to-itiveness, and it's really persistence, but stick-to-itiveness is a really good way to describe it, because, sometimes you fail and you got to go. I think, Greg, I had a group of pigs that we took to Marshall, Missouri to the Tyson plant. It was one of my last master's trials. Talked to the plant, went back the next day to collect carcass data, and they said, oh, we forgot. And 160 pigs are gone.
Yeah.
Hey, we got growth data. It was a carcass modifier trial. So.
Yes.
But you have to have those failures. So you've got 5 children from 5 to 12.
Yep.
And you have the same conversations around the table that we had. The joy of my children have a veterinarian and a nutritionist as parents. How are you helping them prepare for failures and turning those failures into successes?
Yeah. And so we do the same thing. So my kids are showing sheep. So my oldest is shown for a couple of years, and I have twins that are 9 that this is their first year in 4-H, and just, teaching them the responsibility of going out and feeding the animals and cleaning the pens, and just all those steps. And there have certainly been moments where, we forgot to water the chickens. Okay, well, let's go do that now. Like let's,
we know what happened then.
Just those times. I mean, nobody died, so like, it's okay. But certainly we're both, so my husband's a ruminant nutritionist. And so, he's very passionate about feeding animals and all those types of things, as you can relate to. So yeah, we're, and going to these shows and showing the lambs, not getting first or not winning happens a lot more often than winning does. And so just trying to have those conversations afterwards, like this is the progress you made, right? You showed the lamb better in these ways this time. You worked on your showmanship, and these specific things that we try to point out to help them grow, and just to try to help them know that they don't have to be perfect. And we want them to fail. We expect them to fail at some level so that they can learn and progress and be better for it.
As you were describing that, I could not help but think about how we should act as managers. Every person that we manage is not going to be the number one perfect employee.
Yep.
Doesn't matter, sales, boar stud, semen salesman, whatever. But we need to lead them. And what you're doing and the experiences that your children have and my children have with, okay, we took baby steps, and we got better. That should make them better employees, better managers, shouldn't it?
I believe so. And I think the second part of that is leading them the way they need to be led. We can't just have a blanket approach. My kids are all very different. The
Mm-hmm.
people that I work with are all very different. The managers for the boarsteads are all very different. So trying to meet them in a place and work hard. It's hard to do, right? It's you have to do a lot of homework. It's hard to know how to lead people differently sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
not just treat them all the same way and say, oh, we're going to have biweekly calls and you're going to update me on these things. But there may be people that need different things, and they may
Mm-hmm.
not voice that to you. So you've got to do your homework and try to figure that out. The same thing with my kids. They're very different. And so I'm in different personalities. So may need to be treated in a different way.
Well, and I think we get back to the mantra that I've used. The animals are the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people that is the tough part. And
Yep.
you hit on it a little bit before, where you talked about nobody wants to fail. There's a hypersensitivity to success.
Mm-hmm.
Are people like our children that have exposure to programs where they will fail or not have the success that they think they should, they're the unicorns now.
I think so. And I think that they'll be more resilient because of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the sad part is, working with college students and then just high school students, just some of the anxiety that they face. Right. And whether it's that they put on themselves, or that they feel like others put on them, they lack some of that resiliency. And so that's my hope, right, with the way that we're raising our kids, is that we can help create that resiliency and they can be role models for their peers, to try to continue that.
I love your word resiliency. That the elasticity of the brain and elasticity of experiences makes us more resilient. And I'm afraid that as we put so much pressure on people to be perfect and success, and we have grade inflation.
Mm-hmm.
I go to high school graduation, say he graduated with a 4.9, and going, what? Did he go back to Purdue and was on a 6-point scale?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, you're perfecter than perfect.
Right.
I see that we're not allowing people to fail, to learn from their failures.
Yep, exactly. And that's another thing I try not to, just talking about like grades. Like if one of the kids comes home and they've not done very well on a test and they're upset about it, just try to say, okay, but how can we take the next step? How can we get better? So I think grades are important, but from my perspective, they're not the ultimate thing. And so I try to convey that to my kids as well, that's not, yes, I want you to get good grades. At the same time, do you have to get A+ on everything? No, as long as you're learning something and making steps forward.
That's really funny because between the two of us, we probably have 40 years of formal education between the two of us.
Yeah.
And you and I both have the same opinion that grades ain't all of it. Because I think about those people that graduated from Purdue with a 4.0.
Yep.
They're not any more successful than you and I are.
Yep, for sure.
But maybe that's a little bit of confirmation bias.
Yeah, right. That could be. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, look. But it's interesting to hear your experience working with people that have no livestock experience and how their upbringing formed them. And it gets back to the basics. If we give people experiences and allow them to have successes and failures, that makes them better employees, better animal handlers, better people in society.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yep.
Wow. See, that wasn't on the script.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. ChatGPT did not help me come up with about successes and failures.
Yeah.
I also think about the way we were brought up and the broad experience and the resiliency has helped our brains. Maybe it clouded them, but in my example, I'll be 54 in 2 months. I'm using ChatGPT like a fiend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I had conversations after band practice with my son's freshman classmates, and we were talking about using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I mean, who'd have thought that we'd be talking about some sort of computer program or analog together?
Yeah.
Which is,
who knows?
But I think a lot of that goes back to our upbringings, allows us to have the elasticity of our brain to do more than just, yeah, that's my job and this is what I do. I don't need to get outside of it, and I already know.
Right. Yeah. Just Yep.
So the resiliency of your education, how did that help you when you were working with technology to improve fertility of boars, virility?
Oh, virility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They spelled it wrong. I would have gotten it because they missed an I. Because I'm like, V. Now it makes sense. There's an I between the R and the L. Virility.
Yeah.
Well, duh.
Yeah. Yep.
I did
Yeah.
learn that from Dr. Stewart and Dr. Singleton.
Yeah.
Virility. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think like with the example of that technology, like the virility for fertilized technology or other technologies that we're always trying to deploy, we're going to have a lot of setbacks when it comes to, ultimately we would love to predict ovulation and love to have a more easy handheld way to predict fertility of boars. And so it takes a lot of, it's a lot of one step forward, two steps back. I think we learn a lot of things and we try to put those into place. But then we learn that, this other biomarker actually maybe has a bigger impact on fertility than we thought. And so it's just, some of these things are very complex. Reproduction is very complex, like a lot of other things. And just, you think you have one piece of the puzzle figured out, and then you realize, well, that's maybe a lot smaller piece of the puzzle than you originally thought. And so a lot of it's just, making progress where we can, but knowing that the solution may not be 100% perfect. And there may be other things that we have to pair with that solution to get the results that we want to get.
Mm-hmm. On paper, A plus B plus C equals the outcome we want. And then we throw in that variable of biology.
Yeah.
That unknown, particularly when you're talking about hormones, it makes perfect sense. The pituitary does this and that, and boom. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, hey, did you realize the pancreas comes in here and insulin has an effect? Like, no way, we're talking reproduction. Just
all those things.
Off the cuff.
And then the compounding management things that influence, right, how the hormones respond in the body, the biology of the sow. And so if the biology was perfect, if the management was perfect, and we get the same outcome every time, it'd be a lot easier. But it's not.
Yeah. So I can imagine the equations that Dr. Schinckel would put together: A plus B, and then we have randomness, and then we have randomness of the handler, and randomness of the environment, and you have randomness of the boar.
Yes. All the complexities.
Dr. Schinckel was on my PhD committee.
Okay.
So he was adjunct at K-State, and he flew in, and I'll never forget Dr. Nelson the night before my dissertation defense, or it was prelims, one or the other. He said, if Alan starts talking, shut up and let him talk.
Yeah.
He threw out, well, we have two identical buildings on a hill, and how do you account for environmental difference between those in a study? And I started to answer the question, and next thing you know, he's like, took off. And on the other side of the room was Dr. Sung Koo, who is an absolute genius. I would put him and Alan together with the most smart people I've ever met.
Okay. Yep. Yeah.
And you can see Dr. Koo's like, I got questions to ask. And Dr. Koo is like, and Alan's just got off on this building and this and environment. And Dr. Nelson was sitting in front, and he just looked at me and smiled and just nodded his head, just let him go. And pretty soon you're like, we only have 15 minutes left, Alan.
Yes.
Oh, and I'm sure your conversations with him are different because you throw in the breeding, which comes into the genetics. Like,
yes, it's very interesting. And Dr. Schinckel, I do appreciate. I mean, I think I get weekly emails from him. I think a lot of people do, but weekly emails from him on different papers, like, what about this for boys? What about this? And so just like constant like feed of like information and like, you should think of this or look at this, or it's just, it's good. Like, I appreciate that. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's Dr. Schinckel. So
that is, and the time that he learned how to blind copy, oh boy, he sent it to the world, but we don't know what the world was.
Exactly. You don't know who was on those emails, but
he had his first child when I was a junior, I think. And Alan's a big guy. and his wife's not petite. And Dr. Lemonager, God bless him, he put on a pair of pulling chains on Dr. Schinckel's door with a big sign said "Cow Killer." And let's bring it. Oh, geez, Alan.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised it took us an hour to get to Alan's stories.
Me too. Yeah. Oh.
Wow. Well, Amanda, this is great. And I have to make an admission. You're the first interview I've done that wasn't a friend.
Okay.
So we started from scratch. Yeah. So this is great. Thanks for being easy on me.
Sure. And it's a good conversation.
Yeah. And I think that there's some things that we can take home from it, that we need to allow our people to fail. We need to allow our people to have experiences, and we need to understand that we need to cultivate those failures to make us better people. And as you're leading people, particularly in boar studs, we have to manage those failures so that they become successes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, that's an excellent summary. Yep.
Well, we end every one of my podcasts with the same questions. And you being in the swine industry, I think back to Mario when he started his first podcast, and he was like, the three famous questions. And he,
yeah, right.
And now they've changed. But we've kept our questions the same. And as we think back to the objective, we're talking about obscure things in people's past and their foundation and how that formed them. So that's why the 5 questions are the way they are. So if you're ready for those, here we go.
Yep. Okay.
What is one lesson from agriculture that you carry with you every day?
I think we've kind of alluded to this earlier, but I think just the power of grit and overcoming obstacles. I think that's certainly one thing among many. But I think that's certainly one thing that has stood out. And I recently read a book called The Obstacle is a Way by Ryan Holiday. I highly encourage that if you're looking for a book to read. But it just talks about having that framework to convert those obstacles into opportunities. And so I think that's certainly something that I've learned along the way.
Well, you're not the only one to bring up that one. And I think as people answer that question, there's a consistent theme to it. And it's grit, overcoming obstacles, get out of bed and do something. And they're all similar.
Mm-hmm.
If you could sit down and have coffee with one historical figure in ag, who would it be?
So when I think about this one, my mind automatically goes to the lens of reproduction. And so I think one person that's passed now that I would like to have more conversations with is Dr. George Foxcroft. And so I got to work with him a little bit when he was living and doing research, but I always appreciated how open and curious he was about everything. And he didn't let the way things that have always been done dictate the way that he did research going forward. And he had a really profound impact on reproduction. And so I just admired the way that he could think about things and ask questions, even if he wasn't sure how he was going to get the answer, but that at least stimulated the thinking of others around him. And so I really appreciated the work that he's done and the person that he was.
Well, it's interesting you bring him up because I had one conversation with him when I was preparing my PhD program. And I had this great idea that I could work with Mark at Clay Center, and we could radio label feed ingredients and feed sows, and then we could measure stuff. It was really cool on paper. And he said, it's really cool on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. The essence of that conversation was that's way too far outside the box.
Yeah.
It laid it out as you have a career's worth of ideas in this one trial that you want to do. So I'm like, well, thank you, Dr. Foxcroft.
Yes.
Check that one off.
Yeah.
Dr. Foxcroft. I can say nobody else has ever mentioned Dr. Foxcroft. That's a neat one.
That's the first. Yeah.
And the nice thing about your example, it's somebody that inspired you, that helped think outside the box.
Yes.
And I think we've all had those. And I think back to the person that inspired me. It was Truman Martin and a beef nutritionist on the 3rd floor of Lilly when I had to interview them, Animal Science 281, the very first class of Animal Science 281. and they both said, you got to go to grad school. And they
Mm-hmm.
were GI Bill World War II professors
Okay.
that
Wow.
understood.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
those people inspired me. So that's great.
Yep.
What is one underappreciated or quirky thing about farming, agriculture, or your work that more people should know? And we already talked about the corkscrew, so you can't say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I still think it kind of goes along with just the workings of a boar stud, right? I mean, when you talk to sow farms or you talk to others in the industry, just their lack of real understanding of what goes into that and how many QC protocols are in place and how many steps there are to really try to ensure that that dose of semen is as good as we can get it. So I think that's something that, I wish more people had experience with. At the same time, we're pretty particular about who we let in the door at Borsted from a biosecurity standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that would give people a better perspective.
Yeah, we have taken something so simple as breeding and made it so complicated because we had to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
For sure. Yep.
it's no longer A plus B equals baby. It's because the way our systems have changed.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite ag-related tool, product, or innovation?
Yeah. So on this one, I'm going to mention something that's not swine related yet, and it's sex semen. And so sex semen is more prevalent right on the dairy and bovine side of things than it is on the pig side of things. And the reason that I bring that up is because it has a much more impact on animal welfare and just the global population than we give it credit for. Because, one of the things I think about is, where like in India, there's a lot of dairy production and they want those heifer calves. If they don't, then the male calves are just kind of left to the side of the road. Like there's no value for them in those calves because they don't eat beef. And so having a tool like that can specifically say we're going to have heifers so that we kind of overcome some of those animal welfare obstacles and try to help producers, I think is really fascinating. And I hope we get there someday with other species at a more efficient level like we do on the beef side and the dairy side.
Yes. And we have those conversations about sex semen on the positive side. Oh, hey, we can sex semen and we get more heifers in this dairy unit. We can switch to sex semen for bulls so that we can sell this one in management. Really cool. But I really, really like your example because it's not one I thought about, but one I think about every day. And it's some of my listeners will be like, you think about this every day? Well, maybe not every day, but quite a bit.
Yes.
Cockerels.
Mm-hmm.
If we could figure out how to sex semen in the poultry industry, that would eliminate a massive, 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 massive animal welfare issue.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
And you talk about obscure.
Yeah.
Cockerels in the layer industry is an obscure thing that only a few of us know about. But man, if we could sex semen for roosters, whoo. Imagine a herd of minions going through a barn.
Yeah.
AI. If we could robot. Yeah. That I love sex semen. That is neat. And it's neat because my daughter works for Neogen on the genetic the genomic side. So she's working with the ear punches and the different markers and A1 and B1 and all this. So listen to her talk on the biomarker and selection side, and you're talking about the sex semen side. I mean, we could be right on the edge of some really cool stuff in livestock, beef in particular. So.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And I think we probably hit on this one, but interested in how you would distill it. But the last question is, what is one small change that can make a big impact on the future of agriculture?
I think, it goes back to kind of our conversation around people, right? And being open to those that don't have that background or being open to those that have a different background than maybe you would originally recruit for or want people to come work for you. Because a lot of those people are very sharp. They're going to go work somewhere, right? They're going to go work in an industry, and we want them in the swine industry. We want them to work for us. And so just being open-minded about who you talk to and who you hire and go from there.
Yeah, and it might be easier as unicorns like me leave the industry.
Some
we
biases there. Yeah. Yeah.
we
It
we
is hard.
we,
It's a
we
hard
might
thing.
be a little opinionated.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
This has been a great conversation, Amanda, and I wish our paths would have crossed more over the years than they have, but I really appreciate the perspective you brought to my audience about how your roots helped you step outside of your comfort zone, the examples, and think about Dr. Foxcroft, the people that helped you think outside your comfort zone and your box. And I think you've got some nuggets to help our people understand what the modern pig industry is, but how we can manage people in the pork industry. So listeners, thanks for joining us today. Another episode of Patio Pondering where we dug deep into some of these ag roots. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give me a follow, give us a like, and I will put in the show notes the book that Amanda talked about that she prompted us to think about how we can lead people. So Amanda, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It was an opportunity. Thanks.